The world knew him as the voice of reggae, the prophet of peace and unity. But on that December evening in 1976, Bob Marley sat in his Kingston home on Hope Road. Outside, Jamaica was tearing itself apart. Inside, he was preparing for a concert that would either unite the nation or get him killed. If you remember the 70s, you know how dangerous Kingston was during election season. Politicians with guns, gangs controlling neighborhoods, people disappearing in the night. But what you don't know is what was happening in the shadows around Bob. The threats that arrived daily, the cars that followed him, the feeling that something terrible was coming. But what happened next would change reggae music forever. 7 men would enter his home with weapons. Bullets would fly through rooms where children played. And in 72 hours, Bob would make a decision that proved he feared nothing more than silence. One of them was there to send a message. One of them was there to kill. And one of them would survive to tell a story that still haunts Jamaica today. Before we dive into that night, if you're fascinated by the untold stories behind music's most dangerous moments, hit that subscribe button. We're bringing you exclusive deep dives into the real events that shaped the artist you love. New documentary-style content every week. Now back to December 1976. 1975 had been the year Bob Marley became more than a musician. Born in 9 Mile to a white British naval officer and a black Jamaican woman, for years he'd been building something bigger than himself. Reggae wasn't just music in Jamaica. It was revolution. It was hope. The Wailers had evolved from ska band to international phenomenon. Songs like No Woman No Cry crossed oceans. Albums sold worldwide. But success in Jamaica came with complications. Island Records had taken a chance on Bob. Chris Blackwell saw something in this Rastafarian from the hills. Something that transcended genre. Technical skill married to spiritual honesty. Something undeniable. Catch a Fire dropped in 1973 like lightning. Within months, Bob went from Kingston streets to international stages. Get Up, Stand Up became an anthem. I Shot the Sheriff gave Eric Clapton a #1 hit. Tours sold out across Europe and America. Critics called him a genius. But back home, success created danger. Because in Jamaica, nothing happened without political implications. And Bob's message of unity threatened those who profited from division. By 1976, Jamaica was a powder keg ready to explode. The People's National Party under Michael Manley had embraced democratic socialism. The Jamaica Labour Party saw this as communist conspiracy. Both sides armed supporters. Both sides controlled neighborhoods through violence. Kingston streets ran with blood during election season. Bodies appeared in ditches. Families fled their homes. The island paradise tourists knew was a war zone locals navigated daily. Bob's position was impossible from the start. His music preached peace and unity. One love, one heart. But both political parties wanted his endorsement. Wanted him to choose a side. The PNP thought Bob's messages aligned with Manley's policies. The JLP thought Bob was being used as propaganda. Neither understood that Bob served only Jah, only truth, only music. Through early 1976, the pressure intensified. Politicians visited Hope Road. Promises were made. Threats were implied. Bob tried to stay neutral, tried to keep making music while his country burned. But neutrality in Jamaica's political war was seen as choosing the other side. Everyone wanted Bob Marley, and what people want badly enough, they'll kill for. The relationship between Bob and Jamaica's politicians had always been complicated. They'd grown up in the same Kingston neighborhoods. Some had known each other as youths. When poverty bound you together, political divisions seemed distant. But power changes people. Money changes people. And by 1976, those childhood connections meant nothing. Politics was never simple in Jamaica. Colonialism's legacy, economic inequality, the constant interference of outside powers who saw the island as strategic. Behind the tourism posters, behind the reggae music, Jamaica was a nation at war with itself. When the invitation came, Bob wanted to refuse. The Smile Jamaica concert, December 5, 1976. A free show at National Heroes Park, organized by the government to ease political tensions, officially non-political. Unofficially, everyone knew it was a PNP event. The JLP saw it as Michael Manley using Bob for propaganda. The timing was suspicious. General elections scheduled for December 15th. 10 days after the concert, Bob would be performing in the middle of an election campaign. Bob consulted with his brethren, the 12 tribes of Israel, fellow Rastafarians who understood that music was ministry, that performing wasn't about politics, it was about healing. The decision was made. Bob would perform, not for Manly, not for the PNP, for Jamaica, for the people who needed hope. But playing the concert meant becoming a target. And what Bob didn't know yet was that 7 men were already planning, already preparing, already moving into position for an attack that would shock the world. Those who worked with Bob in late November 1976 noticed the tension. The usual joy was gone. He became quiet, watchful. Security around Hope Road increased. Strange cars appeared on the street. Phone calls came at odd hours with no one speaking. The music continued. Rehearsals for Smile Jamaica, new recordings, but something had changed. The air felt heavy with approaching violence. Between rehearsals, band members saw Bob standing at windows, watching the street, checking faces in passing cars. Rita noticed it too. After years of marriage, she knew when her husband sensed danger. But what could they do? Cancel the concert? Run? Bob Marley didn't run, and Jamaica needed this concert. But the real threat wasn't what Bob suspected. It was who was coming. Political violence in Jamaica didn't announce itself. It came fast, it came brutal, and it came from directions you never anticipated. Late November blurred into early December. The band rehearsed daily, working through the set list, perfecting the sound. The Smile Jamaica concert was meant to be more than a show. It was meant to be a statement that Jamaica could heal. That music transcended politics. The rehearsals at Hope Road became routine. Band members arriving, equipment being tested, normal sounds of Kingston drifting through windows. But in the shadows, the plan was being finalized. 7 men had been chosen, paid substantial amounts, armed with weapons, given one instruction: make sure Bob Marley never reaches that stage. The men were professionals. Some had military training, some had killed before. All understood that attacking Bob Marley meant attacking a prophet. But money silences conscience. And someone powerful had decided Bob alive was more dangerous than Bob dead. The threats had been building for weeks. Anonymous messages left at Hope Road. Warnings passed through channels. Rumors of plots to disrupt the concert. Phone calls in the night with breathing but no words. Cars following Bob through Kingston. Men watching the compound. The psychological warfare was constant. Designed to create fear, designed to make Bob cancel. But Kingston in 1976 was full of threats, full of rumors. How do you separate real danger from psychological warfare? Bob increased security, called trusted friends to stay close, made sure Rita and the children were never alone. Armed guards at the gates now. Something Bob had resisted because weapons contradicted his message, but keeping his family alive mattered more. Still, you can't live in a fortress, can't perform from behind walls. And in Jamaica, determined men with weapons find ways. The first specific warning came on December 1st. A message through Rastafarian channels. Someone had heard something. 7 men, weapons, a plan for Hope Road. The information was vague, no names, no specific time, but credible enough that Bob's inner circle took notice. More security was arranged. Additional guards posted. The rehearsal schedule adjusted. Fewer people allowed into Hope Road. Rita wanted to take the children and leave Kingston, find safety in the countryside. But where was safe in Jamaica during election season? That night, Bob barely slept. Every sound from the street seemed threatening. Every car passing by could contain assassins. The weight of the decision pressed on him. 80,000 people were counting on this concert. Jamaica needed this moment of unity, but the threats were real. Men with guns were planning something. The only question was when. December 2nd dawned with heavy tension. The band arrived for rehearsal, but the atmosphere was different. Everyone felt it. The security presence was obvious. Armed guards at every entrance. Cars being checked. The music continued, but the joy was gone. Replaced by nervous energy. By understanding that standing with Bob Marley in December 1976 meant accepting risk. The rehearsal was tight. Professional. Every song performed with precision. But between songs, the silences felt heavy. Band members exchanging looks, wondering if this would be their last rehearsal together. if tomorrow's concert would happen, if any of them would survive to see December 6th. Bob pushed through the set list, determined, focused, refusing to show fear. The sound check at National Heroes Park confirmed the stage setup was perfect. 80,000 people were expected. Maybe more, the largest free concert Jamaica had ever seen. Tomorrow would be historic. Tomorrow would prove that music matters more than politics. Tomorrow would show Jamaica a different path. If they could just survive tonight. That evening, another warning arrived. More specific this time. Tomorrow night. During the final rehearsal, 7 men, armed and paid. The plan was Hope Road. The target was Bob. The goal was to prevent the concert by any means necessary. Bob's security team wanted to cancel everything. Move locations, hide, but Bob refused. Tomorrow was December 3rd. The concert was December 5th. They had 48 hours. Bob believed he could reach that stage. Believed music was worth the risk. Believed Jamaica needed this concert more than he needed safety. The night passed slowly. Bob walking the grounds of Hope Road, thinking about Rita, about the children, about Jamaica, about whether one concert was worth dying for. The answer kept coming back the same. Yes, because it wasn't about one concert. It was about proving that bullets don't control truth, that violence doesn't dictate what messages get heard, that an artist's voice matters. December 3rd, 1976, the day before the concert. Morning came with clouded skies. Rain threatened. The band gathered at Hope Road for the final rehearsal. The atmosphere was tense from arrival. Security checked every vehicle. Every person. Guards with weapons visible. The band members exchanged nervous glances. They all knew about the warnings. About the 7 men, some had suggested canceling, moving elsewhere, but Bob refused. This was his home. The rehearsal was professional despite the tension. Every song tight, every transition smooth, but between songs the silences felt heavy. The bass player kept watching the gates. The drummer checked his watch repeatedly. Rita moved through the house with forced calm, preparing food, trying to maintain normalcy for the children. But everyone could feel it. The waiting, the certainty that something was coming. Afternoon rehearsal finished. The band began packing up. This was usually joyful, joking, planning, excitement about tomorrow's massive concert. But today people packed quickly, wanting to leave before darkness fell. Kingston at night during election season was dangerous. For Bob's band at Hope Road, with threats circulating, it was potentially fatal. Some band members made excuses to leave early. Others stayed out of loyalty. Evening fell over Kingston. The quality of light changed. Tropical warmth gave way to evening coolness. The smell of cooking ackee and saltfish drifting from neighborhood kitchens. Reggae playing from nearby houses. Children's laughter on the street. Normal Friday evening rhythms. The sounds should have been comforting. Instead, they felt like denial. Like Kingston pretending tomorrow would be normal. Bob's manager, Don Taylor, arrived to review final logistics. Transportation plans for tomorrow. Security details at National Heroes Park. They discussed routes from Hope Road to the venue. Contingency plans if violence erupted. Medical teams on standby. Police presence that couldn't be trusted because police took orders from politicians. Every detail mattered. Every decision could mean life or death. Inside Hope Road, the band was winding down. Instruments being packed. Cables being coiled. Rita was in the kitchen with the children, trying to maintain routine. Dinner needed preparing. Life needed continuing. But her hands shook. Bob noticed. He always noticed when Rita was scared. After years of marriage, they communicated without words. He moved to the kitchen, touched her shoulder. Silent reassurance, a promise neither believed but needed. The evening was warm. Typical December in Kingston. Band members relaxing in different rooms, some smoking, some talking quietly about tomorrow, some just sitting with thoughts about whether they'd survive to see the concert. The weight of threats hung over everything. Every sound from outside made people tense. Every car passing could be carrying the 7 men. Bob knew they were coming. Not when, not exactly how. But he knew, you don't get warnings that specific without them being real. 7 men, weapons Hope Road tonight or tomorrow, before the concert. The only question was whether Bob would be ready, whether his security would be enough, whether his faith in Jah would protect him, or whether tomorrow's headlines would read that Bob Marley died before he could preach unity. Rita was in the kitchen with the children. Bob in one room discussing tomorrow's set list one final time, making sure every song choice reinforced the message. Don Taylor near the entrance reviewing transportation. Nobody noticed the cars stopping outside. Nobody saw the men emerging with weapons. Nobody heard them coming until too late. Because determined killers don't announce themselves. They come in silence. They come when you've almost convinced yourself the threats were just threats. What happened in the next few minutes would become legendary. The front door burst open. 7 men rushing in, guns raised, shouting, commands, threats. The band scattered. Instruments dropped. Chairs overturned. Rita screamed. A sound that would haunt everyone who heard it. Bob turned toward the noise just as the first shots exploded. Not warning shots. Shots meant to kill. Aimed at bodies, at heads, at the heart of reggae music itself. Bullets tearing through walls, through furniture, through instruments, through flesh. The smell of gunpowder mixing with cooking food smells. Acrid, burning. The sound of screaming mixing with gunfire. Glass shattering. Wood splintering. Chaos erupting in the place Bob called sanctuary. Don Taylor saw them first. Saw the guns. Saw the murder in their eyes. He was closest to the door. Former football player, strong, quick reflexes. Threw himself in front of Bob without thinking. Pure instinct, protecting the artist, taking bullets meant for the messenger, 5 rounds hitting him. Chest, abdomen, legs, each potentially fatal, each tearing through organs, breaking bones. He fell but stayed conscious, watching the nightmare unfold through pain. Blood spreading across the floor. The attackers moving through rooms, methodical despite chaos, hunting, searching for Bob, for Rita, checking corners, opening doors. Weapons raised. Bob took a bullet in the chest. Another grazed his arm. The impact spinning him, pain exploding through his body like fire, white-hot, disorienting. But survival instinct kicked in. Years of growing up in Trenchtown. Years of understanding Jamaica's streets required constant awareness. He ran, not away from danger, toward Rita, toward his wife trapped in the wrong room. Found her already hit. Bullet in her head. Blood matting her hair. Still alive somehow, still conscious, eyes wide with terror. Bob grabbed her, pulled her deeper into the house, looking for escape, for cover, his own blood mixing with hers, both wounded, both moving on adrenaline, the sounds of gunfire continuing. The attackers were professionals but not perfect. They'd expected quick execution, in and out before anyone could respond. But the house was larger than they'd mapped. More rooms. More hiding places, and Bob wasn't dying quickly enough. Don Taylor wasn't dead despite 5 bullets lodged in his body. Rita was moving despite a bullet that grazed her skull. The plan was falling apart faster than they could adapt. Neighbors were shouting from windows. Police sirens wailing in the distance, getting closer every second. Time running out. The 7 men retreated, running back to their cars parked on the street, leaving behind bullet casings that would never be matched to weapons. Blood pooling on floors, bodies bleeding, and one very much alive Bob Marley who would testify to the world. The aftermath was absolute chaos. Police arrived within minutes, ambulances screaming up Hope Road, media descending like vultures. The story spreading through Kingston like wildfire through dry grass. Bob Marley had been shot. Rita Marley had been shot. Don Taylor was critical with 5 bullets in his body. The Smile Jamaica concert was scheduled for December 5th. Just 2 days away. Would it be canceled? Would Bob survive the night? Would Jamaica explode into open civil war with Bob's death as the spark? But Bob made a decision in that hospital that nobody expected. Doctors were treating his wounds, removing the bullet from his chest, cleaning the arm wound. Both injuries were relatively minor compared to Don Taylor, who was fighting for his life in surgery. Minor compared to what could have been if bullets had traveled inches differently. The bullet that entered Bob's chest had missed his heart by millimeters. Rita's head wound looked horrific with blood everywhere, but the bullet had only grazed her skull without penetrating the bone. They were alive, barely, miraculously, but alive, and Bob had a choice to make right there in that hospital bed. Cancel the concert, hide somewhere safe, leave Jamaica entirely, or do the one thing nobody could predict. The decision came from somewhere deeper than logic. Bob wasn't just a musician. He was a messenger, a prophet preaching unity and resistance. Someone had tried to silence that message with bullets, tried to prevent tomorrow's concert with violence. And Bob understood that canceling would mean they'd won, that fear would win, that violence would prove stronger than music. That couldn't happen, wouldn't happen, even if it killed him. December 5th, 1976, National Heroes Park, Kingston. 80,000 people gathered despite the assassination attempt just 48 hours earlier. Despite rumors that more violence was planned for the concert itself. Despite police warnings broadcast on radio telling people to stay home for their own safety. They came anyway. They came because Bob Marley had promised to perform. Because if Bob wasn't afraid after taking bullets in his own home, they wouldn't be afraid either. Because Jamaica desperately needed proof that music was stronger than murder. That unity could survive violence. That hope wasn't dead in Kingston's blood-soaked streets. The crowd packed National Heroes Park, rich and poor standing shoulder to shoulder. Political rivals from PNP and JLP neighborhoods united by something bigger than party politics. United by Bob. United by the need to witness a miracle. The sun set over Kingston, painting the sky orange and purple and red like the blood that had been spilled. The stage lights came up bright against the gathering darkness. And from behind the curtain, still bandaged under his clothes, still in pain that medication couldn't fully touch, still weak from blood loss and trauma, Bob Marley walked out onto that stage. The roar from 80,000 throats shook the night. People crying openly, screaming his name until their voices broke. Not just fans anymore, believers, witnesses to something bigger than entertainment, bigger than music. Watching a man rise from a hospital bed barely 2 days after being shot to prove that bullets don't kill ideas, that violence doesn't silence truth, that music matters more than murder, that Jamaica's soul was worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth living for even more. Bob lifted his shirt slowly, showed the massive crowd his bandages, his wounds, physical evidence of what had been done to him just 2 nights ago at Hope Road. Evidence that he survived against all odds. Evidence that he was standing here anyway, performing despite the pain. The crowd's response was deafening, tears streaming down thousands of faces, hands raised toward the stage in supplication, in gratitude, in disbelief, a collective understanding that they were witnessing something that would be talked about for generations, that this moment would define what Jamaica could become. What happened on that stage transcended music. Bob performed for 90 minutes straight. Every song was a declaration of survival, every note an act of defiance against those who'd tried to silence him. The band behind him, themselves shaken from witnessing the shooting, themselves traumatized from seeing their friends bleeding, stood strong and played with intensity born from knowing they were part of history. Rita off stage despite her own injuries, bandaged head hidden under cloth, watching her husband do what seemed impossible just days ago. Don Taylor still in hospital fighting for his life, listening on radio from his bed, hearing the crowd roar, knowing the sacrifice hadn't been in vain. And somewhere in Kingston's shadows, the 7 men who'd pulled those triggers, watching their complete failure, broadcast live to the entire nation, watching Bob Marley prove that violence doesn't win, that fear doesn't conquer truth, that music matters more than murder ever could. The performance became instant legend. Bob collapsed immediately after leaving the stage. Adrenaline that had sustained him for 90 minutes finally wearing off, pain reasserting itself with crushing force. Doctors rushed him directly back to hospital for emergency treatment. But the message had been sent to Jamaica and the world beyond. Bob Marley was not afraid. Violence would not dictate what messages get heard. Music would continue despite bullets and blood. Jamaica could heal if people chose unity over division. And the men who'd tried to kill him had accomplished the exact opposite of their goal. They hadn't silenced a prophet. They'd made him immortal. They hadn't stopped a message. They'd amplified it beyond anything money or propaganda could achieve. In the weeks that followed, Bob left Jamaica. Not running, regrouping. The Wailers relocated to London. The album Exodus began taking shape. Songs about movement, about survival. The shooting influenced everything. The investigation went nowhere. 7 men never identified, never prosecuted. What mattered was Bob survived. His survival meant truth was harder to kill than power imagined. Through 1977 and 1978, Bob lived in exile, making music. Touring the world. Exodus released to acclaim. Jamming. One Love. Three Little Birds. Songs born from trauma but radiating hope. In April 1978, the One Love Peace Concert. Bob returned to Jamaica, brought together political enemies Michael Manley and Edward Seaga on stage, forced them to shake hands. The image became iconic. Bob continued making music until cancer took him in 1981, but the legacy of December 3, 1976 lived on. Proof that artists matter, that music threatens those who profit from division. Looking back now, the attempt stands as a turning point. The shooting didn't silence Bob Marley. It amplified him. What Bob learned changed everything. That performing isn't safe, that truth creates enemies, but also that fear is the real enemy, that the only way through terror is straight through it. For those who witnessed Bob walk onto that stage 2 days after being shot, the memory never fades. The proof that art transcends violence. The legacy became proof that trying to silence a message often amplifies it. 7 gunmen entered Hope Road to end Bob Marley. They failed. The world gained a prophet. Bob walked onto that stage with bullets in his body and showed Jamaica what courage looks like. That's why Bob Marley became proof that art wins, that music matters more than murder.